The music in this episode was recorded before a live studio audience and was sung by the live studio audience in Newton, Massachusetts. This is a special bonus edition of Judaism Unbound, Communal Singing. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Lex Rofberg, and Dan isn't with us for this bonus episode, not because he wouldn't love to be, but because this bonus episode is actually a recording of a live event in Boston, Massachusetts, technically Newton, Massachusetts, at Hebrew College, where I was privileged to be one of the guests at an incredible conference on the future and the transformation of American synagogues. And I was moderator for a great panel where we looked at Jewish singing. We looked at communal Jewish singing. We looked at questions of worship, questions of community, questions of melody, of performance, all of these that will come up in the body of this episode because this is an edited version of that live event. I want to introduce the two panelists. They're two really talented, really incredible individuals. And the first one is David Fainsilber. He's from Montreal, Canada originally, and he currently lives in Morrisville, Vermont, where he serves the Jewish community of Greater Stowe as their rabbi. He is an alum of Hebrew College's Rabbinical School, a musician and a writer, and a former Interfaith Circle Fellow. He also was a Colt Tzedek Fellow with AJWS, that's American Jewish World Service, and rabbinic intern for MIT and Tufts Hillels. In addition to David Fainsilber, on the panel was Jessica Kate Meyer, who served for 4 years as rabbi of Romamu and recently became the rabbi and chazan at The Kitchen in San Francisco, a community that we've featured on the podcast in the past. She also was ordained by Hebrew College's Rabbinical School, and she studied sacred Jewish music with a number of rabbis from both Sephardic and Ashkenazi traditions, and performed as a vocalist with ensembles in New York, Boston, and Jerusalem. You may know Jessica Kate Meyer from her principal role in The Pianist, the movie directed by Roman Polanski a number of years ago. She was prominently featured in that and was very impressive in that role. So I'm thrilled to have been in conversation with both of them and to have been a part of this incredible conference at Hebrew College. And we wanted to give you a chance to hear our part of it. So without further ado, we'll jump right into the panel.
Hi, I'm Jessica. I got to learn at Hebrew College in the Beit Midrash. I was ordained with David Fainsilber in 2014. And my journey with Jewish music and communal singing began when I was 5 years old, when my family had just moved to a new town, a really lame town called West Hartford, Connecticut. And it's bad. Anyway, we moved and we started going to this very society synagogue. And I'd started playing the violin. I was very engaged in music from birth. And so at 5, we walked into the synagogue, and immediately it was like a laser beam to the neshama, with the voice of the chazan, Moshe Langsner. And I heard him sing, and I said, I didn't have the language for it, but I was like, that's mine. There's nothing else, no cantatas, nothing else will speak to me the way this music speaks to me. So I began following him around. I began, singing, and then, Hebrew school knocked all of the soul out of me because I didn't go to the Mensch Academy at Mishkan, and it took me, so I went off to Israel. I worked in theater and film. I went to drama school in London. I played a principal role in The Pianist by Roman Polanski. And that was my first film. And when we were preparing for this film and I was doing lots of research, I met an ethnomusicologist who made me a mixtape because it was 2001 and there were mixtapes, and it was a cassette. And he made me a cassette of all of the music that this woman who came from this family of musicians would have been exposed to, listening to in the years between World War I and World War II in Warsaw. And the first piece on this mixtape was a piece of Chazanut by cantor Gershon Sirota, who was a Warsaw Chazan. And immediately I was like, there was something in that moment. There was a lot on the way there. But that moment did bring me back. And I ended up, when I was in Warsaw, meeting a lot of the new community there, Jewish community. And then I was back in London, living there, working in film. And I started davening, and I'd lived in Israel, so I had the Hebrew, and I went to shul that was like alternated between being an Iraqi shul synagogue and a Carlebach minyan. So it was just such a range, and Sachi synagogue in North London. And so I would go on both days, and I once again was like called in and was davening and loved it so much. Moved to LA to continue working in film and theater, and met my rabbi who mentored me, Sharon Brous. She had just founded Ikar, and I walked into shul one day, and she said, "Come help me lead prayer." And she said, "Come teach, come work with the kids." And I had this very clear experience of turning away from what it is to be an actor, or a performing musician, and what it is to be a builder of community through song and prayer. And there was a lot of clarity in that. I mean, there's so many things that are gray, but this wasn't one of those things. And from that point, I began, my work is building community through song and singing, and there's so much, and playing with lots of different musicians, studying in the Syrian Jewish community in Jerusalem, playing a lot of klezmer music, just growing. And then I moved to Romamu after here, where I was a rabbi and one of the music directors, and so got to work with an incredible community there who just, it's a dream. They walk in and they're there to daven. Nobody is there as a spectator. And then now in San Francisco.
Hi, everybody. It's an honor, and thank you for the invite to Dan and to Sharon, and so humbling to be in this place, as maybe to give over a little bit of what I've learned in these few years as a rabbi in front of wonderful teachers who have taught me, and also in our midst, a little shout out to, I'm the rabbi at the Jewish community of Greater Stowe, and there's a few congregants and friends here, so welcome and thank you for being here. I want to take a step back and start with how I connected to music, maybe even before I knew about quote-unquote Jewish music. My dad, Harry Fainsilber, may his memory be a blessing, was a musician and played guitar, and he wouldn't have called himself a musician, but if you were in a room with him, everyone was singing along, and it was by the fireplace, and it was out on the campfire, and it was everywhere and anywhere, and he connected, he built community, he built friendships and family in many ways, including the music that he brought. And so I grew up him, tapping his feet to a song, sometimes Jewish, but often like 50s and 60s music, and some protest and civil rights music, and a whole mix of what you might expect and things you've never heard of. And that rhythm became a part of my life. It became a part of my soul, and so grateful for that. And it was the rhythm of the foot tapping and always on beat guitar playing and singing. It was also the rhythm of community making, and it was always in service of the community that gathered and the friends and family that gathered. So that's where my musical journey began. My earliest memory of just loving music and being crushed and humbled and broken by it is Kol Nidre in at Dorshe Emet in Montreal, Reconstructionist synagogue with Rabbi Ron Egan. And it's like if you're 8 years old or 9 years old or 10 years old and you're listening to Kol Nidre and you're crying, the synagogue's doing something right. And so, from there, went to Vancouver and found a renewal synagogue that was very participatory and all about everybody singing along, and found a deepening spirituality in the music, and then met my beloved, and 2 months later moved to New York, and then with Rabbi Alana Alpert made our way up to Hebrew College. And on the prospective students' Tashma experience, walked into davening, and there was this sonic arc minyan that, may its memory be for a blessing. Also, unless it's around, keep it all. Yes. Okay, it's still around. And it's noise making or music making and humming, and there's always some melody coming out of people's mouths at any given time in the space. And I thought, wow, I've landed at Hebrew College, and then I got to do that for 5 years here.
So I'm not checking my phone to look at my phone. I have a note from a conversation that the three of us had before about a week ago, where we were just talking about what would be worth spending our time together doing today. And I came into it, and here's my take on American Jewish prayer experiences for me. I had my fill of what I term Hine Matov Judaism when I was like 14 or 15. And I say that, so there's the melodies for Hine Matov that are often used as the fun, get everybody into the room melodies, but I also mean the literal meaning of it. So Hine Matov Umanaim Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. It's about how wonderful, how good it is, how pleasant it is to come together as brothers, as siblings, and be together. And for such a long time, really, like 13, 14 years, that was my experience. And I really thought that what I wanted to do was be part of Jewish community. But eventually, at a certain point, I realized I'm not really content with saying the victory is gathering together. I'm actually not excited to say simply coming together is the pleasant and the good thing. And it is a pleasant and a good thing. I don't mean to dismiss that entirely. But I realized that I was only about to spend my time in worship spaces especially, but even many other kinds of Jewish communal spaces, if they were striving for more than just that coming together. And the way I talk about my experience with Jewish prayer now is that I want reach nichoach. I want that delicious aroma that is ascribed to what God sort of received from the sacrifices in the temple. So like low expectations, right? But genuinely, I expect and strive for excellence in a space of communal singing, of worship, of whatever we are calling it. And I'm not going to go if I'm not looking for that reach nichoach, if I'm not looking to really transcend something about my normalness, then I'm probably not going to go. And something that David said in that phone call resonated with that element of me, and I want to read it because I asked them sort of big picture, what do you want from experiences of communal worship, of communal prayer? And David said the following list. Ready? It's a long one, but it's a goodie. We should strive for prayer that is transformational, primal, God-centered, soul-centering, intimate, community-minded, traditional, creative, emotional, informal, without inhibition, meditative, egalitarian, fostering communal connection, and joyous. And more. So I'm going to pass it back to the two of you, and David, maybe you can start us off. It's an overwhelming list, but I think it's a good list because we should be striving for that, right? Tell us more about why those adjectives came to mind.
Well, maybe to state the obvious, those are aspirational. And they're also inward qualities. They're, if you walk into a synagogue and the singing is not at the height of what we were, just singing in the, with everybody participating, and yet you can still have all of those qualities in your own prayer practice. I wrote that list as I was thinking about my rabbinic priorities. How do I want the davening to be, the prayer to be in a synagogue, and I shared it with the board and of the synagogue, and what feels most alive of those adjectives or qualities. The first being creating an intimate space, creating a Hamish space. I use the word excellence, and I've always kind of graded against that word, depending on how it's used. I feel like there's two kinds of synagogues. Once you say that, it's like you're wrong, obviously, but there are those who strive for excellence, and there are those who strive for Hamishness, and maybe sometimes they meet in the middle. I'm trying to find that middle ground, because it's about community building, it's about bringing people together, it's also about beautiful singing. I am so blessed in Vermont to have incredible musicians, lay musicians, cello and percussion and clarinet and saxophone and etc. And they just sound beautiful. Like we could sit and listen to them, and that would be Dayenu. And so I'm blessed with that, but also at the bottom line is not how quote unquote good the music is, it's are we building relationship together, and what does that relationship look like, and are we connected to each other? Are we, dare I say, hine matov? And it's about the relationships.
Something I learned from my teacher here, Rabbi Eben Lieder, also from my teacher, Chazan Lynn Torgov, and Chazan Brian Meyer, is around prayer as a journey. That every time you're going into a prayer service, you're going places. If you stay in the same place, it didn't happen. Maybe it wasn't even prayer, or maybe it was just flat. And I've actually been reading this wonderful book by Dov Zinger called Tikkun Tefilati. I don't know if anyone has seen it. And it's he talks about one of the things he talks about is that where do you begin the story? What do you take out of the story? And what do you make sure you never take out of the story? Like where the story begins, where the prayer begins, where the melody begins, is going to change the whole story, and it's going to change the whole journey. So I try and use that as a guidepost as I'm planning when I'm thinking about tefillah, and also where the community is, and where they're reaching for and where they're stuck. And it's tremendous to be in both a rabbinic role, a pastoral role, and Ba'alat Tefillah role, to be able to really know the community and what's going on for people, and where they're moving, where they need to go, and I don't actually, that's hubris to think that I know where they need to go or we need to go, but to kind of feel into what is possible in that prayer space, what is possible to open up on that particular day.
if I'm going to ask somebody in the Jewish universe about the idea of theater and of performance, I'm sitting next to a good option, a really good option. And so also in our conversation, we talked a little bit about this, because I feel like there's this evil, scary word, the P word, performance. And I want to unpack it for a second, and I want to think about, what are the pieces that we are rightly scared about and what we want to avoid in prayer context, and why that word performance is what we're not trying to do. But I also want to share at the same time the holiness that can be present in some forms of performance, because I appoint people my rebbes. They don't know that I've appointed them my rebbes. One of them, her name's Alicia Moore. Anybody know who that is? Anybody? Pink, the singer. So I had a spiritual performance a few months ago where I went to a Pink concert, and it was a deeply spiritual experience for me. And I'm not saying that I'm not saying that to make light of that which is spiritual. It was actually a deeply spiritual experience. And my musical background, in college, I had 2 spiritual singing communities. One was Hillel, where I gathered every Friday night and I sang, and it was more than singing, it was worship, it was all sorts of things. And I had my a cappella group, which was not a Jewish a cappella group. And this was a group of people that I came together with regularly and sang for spiritual, holy purposes. And so for me, that question, and that was a performance group, right? So my question is that I'd throw out there to both of you, especially Jessica, given your background in the theatrical, is what is it that we need to distill and say this is the part of performance we don't want in our Jewish spaces of communal worship, of communal singing? And also, though, what are the things that maybe we can learn from a Jew like Adam Levine, who's going to be leading a few million people in communal singing this coming Sunday? What at the Super Bowl? He's the halftime show. A Levite's going to be leading the world in communal singing. So what are the pieces that we really do need to try to stay away from on the performance front? And what could we learn from actors, from musicians, etc.?
Performance.
Yes.
Okay. So it's a totally dirty word, because our generation is responding to previous generations and this idea of the chazan as an opera singer, who's just, we come, we listen, we're passive, and we absorb. But it's not, and we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater in many ways. I mean, I love the idea. I love communal singing. I'm completely committed to communal singing. I think we've gone sometimes in the direction of we've lost the moments where we can just listen and hear. Okay, I'm trying to figure this out. I think. Sorry. I'm really struggling with this idea of what is performative, because I think in a lot of communities, in communities where I've been davening, there is an allergy to performance, and I get it. But to me, what the allergy to is inauthenticity. And it's not about performance, it's about something being hawked and not something being offered as an offering, as a blessing, as a sacrifice, that there's something being just
Don't do that.
That's not. I think it's really about authentic and inauthentic. So trying to read everyone's sense of performance, I think it is about authenticity. It's also, I was recently talking to Rabbi Eli Kampfer, and in his book, Empowered Judaism, he talks about the prayer leader, the difference between a prayer leader who's a performer and the prayer leader who is conducting. And that's, we're conducting energy. And then I also realized I have problems also with conductor, because if you grew up in a classical musical context and you worked with conductors who were perfectionists and who yelled at you, you have to watch out when you're conducting. But how are you conducting the energy in the room in a very kind of Beethoven kind of conducting way?
I mean, I'm thinking about my Pink moment too, and have had those experiences in concert settings where, it's a spiritual experience, and so I think about a Stevie Wonder concert that I've been to, and pretty intimate 3,000 people, and like he's what made it, let's say, for lack of better words, non-performative, was his utter gratitude and humility, and just thanking people for the opportunity to be there, and then hearing that in his music also. And I also think about Bobby McFerrin, who's one of my rabbis, who conducts what I'll call the congregation or the audience, and he brings people along a journey, and he's more often than not solo on the stage, and it's amazing how you can be solo on a stage and for it not to be at all about him. So how do you lead in a way, maybe even with charisma, maybe even with a loud voice, maybe even with, some of that like Stevie Wonder, like funk rock star quality, or more, contemplative qualities, but still not have it be about you.
To be able to lead and not be self-conscious about, oh my God, I'm making a weird face, or I'm like stomping and someone may think that's grotesque, or I don't know. There's a certain level of inhibition that's just like, I'm in my prayer, I'm actually modeling that. There's something performative in knowing that you're modeling something, as long as I'm not dwelling on that or thinking about it, and I can just dive in. But I know that does happen, that like there's a freedom that I experience when I pray that can be helpful to let other people feel free to pray. And to me, that's also a good use.
I'm thinking about a few things. Because we're in the context of a whole day of really great conversations, and I'm just like mentally flagging some words that I think we're holding, whether we've uttered that they're coming up as themes. One is community. Interestingly, I talk to Jews about community, and I think there's actually different ways that people talk about the word community. I think that without realizing it, we ascribe sort of a kahila, a sacredness, like a oneness to the idea of community that for some people, they just mean a group of people gathered. Like they'll just talk about the university community. But most universities, it's not like everybody knows each other. Community. Right, the Hinei Matov community that I'm criticizing. And I think that when we talk about community, we mean more than just a set of people gathered together implicitly in the word because of its roots in Hebrew, of kahila, of all of these mental associations. I was also latching on to what you both said about sort of what it means to lead and what role you're holding. Are you the charisma in the room? Are you sort of following the room in certain senses? Mm-hmm. And I apologize for a second Super Bowl reference today. I'm just in that headspace because I'm in New England and it's that time of year. But I was thinking about a few analogies, and I was curious which, or if it's multiple, which of these you might sort of see as the role of a davener. And I'm being influenced by this, by the way, by Reb Shefa Gold's premise of 8 different roles that people can play in communal experiences of chant. One of them is the quarterback, getting the ball at the beginning of every play on offense and sort of making key decisions and setting the tone for what happens. One of them, by the way, before that, one other model is the coach, who's sort of barking out orders. I think it's probably, my personal inclination would not be the coach. But then there's also the offensive line. So the offensive line's role, I'm sorry, I'm going there, I know.
You got the wrong team.
No, we're top hockey. Yeah, so I'm going to explain what the offensive line's role in football is, and then you can watch the Super Bowl next week at Bria instead of Yitzhira. So the offensive line's role is to pave the way for the runner, to pave the way for the quarterback, to make space for the quarterback. And so my instinct from what you just said is that in certain senses, a prayer leader is actually not leading in the sense we think of as being at the front of the group getting all the attention, but facilitating the experiences of others. And for me, that's the offensive line analogy. You don't have to answer with football metaphors.
I'm an offensive linebacker. Is that a thing? No.
It is now. Okay. It is now. But so I was curious just how, more on this leadership point, what does it mean to be a prayer leader, facilitator, davener, like what is one's role when one's in that position, and how maybe also can one be leading even when you're not like at the front with the mic, with the music? Yeah.
Do you want to start? Do you want me to start? Either way. Okay. I'll start by talking about a failure of mine. When I first started at Romamu, what was great and what was very challenging was I was working amongst two other really amazing davening leaders, Rabbi David Ingber and Chazan Basia Schechter, and the three of us were coming together, leading together. And what quickly came up for me, because I had spent many years in an orchestra, because I had been an actor and not a director, even, I came in and I'm really good at listening to other people's impulses and following them, which is beautiful that everyone has instinct, but somebody's actually got to lead it. And if I'm going to be assigned that role, I got to get better at playing it. Oh, sorry. I got to get better at playing that role and listening to my own instincts. And it's also, I'm sure, very connected to gender. And so a big part of my own learning as a prayer leader was being able to hear my own instinct, to hear my rhythm, even though I started out, I'm a violinist and a singer, I'm not the rhythm section. Well, I had to learn how to be the rhythm section, and I had to know that I knew what my count was if I was feeling it. And again, sometimes that's more important if you're with instruments. I don't know if that makes sense, but that was a big learning for me. I went to Kilat Zion, and there was a new prayer leader who is such a beautiful prayer leader, and there's no amplification, which is such a great thing if you have a big voice. And there was a new prayer leader, and she had such instincts. And no one was following them on this particular night because they had their routine. Everyone had the routine, and here's another leader of tefillah. And instead of listening to what nuances she's bringing, they were like going with what they knew. And so I just got all up in there and got right into the front row and was just trying to, because her instincts were amazing. But it was, and also how does amplification, instrumentation, how does that all fit in? I was just thinking about the football thing again, and just because so you are coach, you are, because you're there on the side and you're guiding the movement. You're also a cheerleader, and you're also hadn't thought about that one. And you get to wear fun outfits with pom-poms.
I'd love to.
And also interpreter. So how are you serving as also an interpreter and a door opener? You're you're inviting people, you're an usher. You're so many exciting things.
The two of you, when we started the session, looked and saw a table and a few chairs up here on the bima, on the stage, and immediately said, no, we're not going to do that. And I have ideas for why that was important, but I think it opens up a thread of conversations about why those pieces, why our space that we're in, why the orientation that we're in can be an important piece. And then after y'all address that, we will open up to your questions.
I'm going to take it on a bit of a different track and say, let's get out of our buildings, right? And we're blessed at Jewish community of Greater Stowe that there are no pews. There are, lovely wooden chairs, and you can move them around in any configuration. And, people ask me, why are you so close to the, I will sit this far away, and it's a semicircle and, multiple circles, and it's about creating that intimacy, but also, let's get out of the synagogues, because there are, to state the obvious, there are people that are not going to walk into a synagogue, but also there are other spiritual places and spaces, and so we've had a really nice partnership with this bar, restaurant, wellness space where we've had, I know, it's an amazing place.
Vodka and Pilates, that was
Vodka. And we've had two big Vermont-wide Hanukkah parties and brought in Kleswoods and New Orleans Klezmer All-Stars, and it's this musical, it's like the best hora you've ever seen, and it happened in Vermont. I mean, you wouldn't expect it, but it's possible. And sometimes, taking that leap of faith and trying something musical and innovative, it could flop, or it could draw new people in and excite people around music.
Just in this other book that I brought, Building Singing Communities by Joey Weissenberg. If you don't have it, grab it. And one of the first things he says is, if there's a bima or like a standing, some sort of stage, get off of it, like fast, because it just creates this real border between the people that you're actually trying to grow in prayer with, and how you have to all be interconnected, not only spiritually but physically. You need to be close, and but it's also, in being a nimble community that moves around a lot, you do come up against the issues of sound all the time, depending on what room you're in.
Should we sing?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna close out with singing. As we do, I'm actually speaking to the people listening right now, and I just want to say to them that I'd like you to sing along, and I mean that, because one thing we didn't get a chance to delve into, but what the walls of our buildings mean today in a world of streaming services, in a world of boundary transgressing in all sorts of ways, is changing. And so I'd ask that those who are listening think of themselves as being a kind of here with us.
Come on up, folks. Lecha dodi likra kala penei Shabbat. Good Shabbos, everybody. Nekavela lecha dodi likra kala. Let's fill it out. Penei Shabbat nekavela lecha dodi likra kala. Penei Shabbat nekavela lecha dodi likra kala. Penei Shabbat nekavela. Come on up. Come. Lecha dodi likra kala. Come on, bring it. Penei Shabbat nekavela lecha dodi likra kala. Penei Shabbat nekavela. Penei Shabbat nekavela. Penei Shabbat nekavela.
Well, that was pretty fun. That was a pretty fun one to close. I hope you did sing along. I sang along while editing, so at the very least, there are 3 different time streams that are intersecting and singing that song. When we met and actually had this conversation in Newton, Massachusetts at Hebrew College, when I was editing and singing by myself at my computer screen, and now when all of you are singing along. So hopefully this time-bending experience has been good for you, and hopefully this was a good chance to just think about what's going on exactly with prayer services, with singing, how that all plays out in Jewish spaces. So I hope you enjoyed it. We're going to close out this bonus episode in the same way that we close out all of our episodes, by encouraging you to be in touch with us. And there are a wide variety of ways for you to do that. First, you can head to our Facebook page, Judaism Unbound. Second, you can head to our Twitter feed at Judaism Unbound. Third, you can go to our website, JudaismUnbound.com. And last but not least, you can always hit us up via email at dan@judaismunbound.com or lex@judaismunbound.com. The last request we like to make is that you can always support us with a financial donation on either a monthly recurring basis or a one-time gift basis. And you can do that at judaismunbound.com/donate. So thanks so much for listening. And with that, This has been the most rock and roll ever episode of Judaism Unbound.